Hi, this is Simon Obstall. I hope you're all safe and well, and welcome to another tutorial for Apple Motion. And today we're going to be taking a look at this advanced glitching effect. So the glitching is interesting in its own right, but we've also got this quite interesting scene with the reflective floor and so on. So I hope you're going to enjoy this one. So let's get started. So let's just look at our project here, 1920, 1080, 24 frames a second, 10 seconds long. So first of all, I want to set up the element that is going to drive the glitching, or rather the set of elements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add object generators, and we're going to use our good old friend clouds. So let's just set this up. Let's have a horizontal scale of 64, and let's reduce the speed to 0. Down here with the layer strengths, I want to set both those first two to 0 and the second two to 1. Then I want to open up the gradient editor. So first of all, let's come to 1 second on the timeline. And then I want to select the white tab here. I want to hit keyframe for its location. And I'm going to set that value to 5%. Then I'm going to step forward to 3 seconds. And I'll set that location up to 100%. Now let's also select the black tab. It's already got a keyframe for its first position. And what we're going to do is set its final location to 90%. So now we've got this effect. So then what I want to do is I want to add a little bit more grey to this. So it's the edges are softer. So I'm going to use filters, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to set the amount to 64. And then what we're going to do is add the filter that's going to turn this into a glitch element, and that is stylize pixelate. So let's increase the pixelate value to something like 27. You can see we've got this blockiness, and that's what we want. And we've got white blocks, a lot of white blocks, a lot of black blocks, and quite a few grey ones as well. The grey ones are really important. So then what I'm going to do is come to the clouds, scale, and I'm going to increase that X scale to 300%. And you see we've got these stretched out blocks. So then what we can do is we can duplicate this to add some variation to it. So I'm going to right-click, duplicate. Now, the way I want to composite these elements is using alpha, but there is no built-in alpha to the clouds. So what we're going to do is we're going to add filters, color, channel mixer, and I'm going to set the alpha to 0, and I'm going to use red for the alpha. And we don't see anything at the moment, but as soon as we start making a change to this, for example, coming over to the generator's offset, you'll see that we can offset that, and when we're layering these up using the transparency from the luminance. So then we want to change up the pixelate value. So instead of 27, I'm going to go for the 63, and I think that's quite good. Let's toggle that on and off. Yes, I think that's going to be good. So let's have another one. Right-click, duplicate. Let's again just change up that pixelate value. I'm going to hide that channel mixer. Let's go for a scale of, 13. Let's have some small ones. And again, let's just adjust that Y offset on the generator. And we can also even just stretch it out on X a lot more, like maybe go for 450. So now we've got a pretty interesting result. And we can always adjust some of these values later if we want to, depending on how our glitch works out. So I just want to make sure that it's completely white at the start and it's completely black at the end. So what I'm going to do is go and take this group, and I'm going to add object generators, add a color solid. I'm going to make this one white. I'll do another one and make it black, and then just turn them both off. The white one, I'll select the white one. I'm just going to come to the point at which I want it to all still to be white. That says 107, I think. Hit O on the keyboard. And then where do we want it to be black? Around about there, 301. Select the black color solid and hit I on the keyboard. And if we turn those both back on again, we're now safely to black for the duration of the end, and we're safely in white for the beginning. And no matter how we change these up, that'll always be the case. So let's now call this group displace source, and let's think about putting it to work. So let's close it up. Let's make a new group. Let's turn off the displace group, and let's select our text tool, and let's type the word glitch. And let's make it about 400 pixels. And let's bring it down a bit. And let's also choose center alignment and properties, just center it up. Actually, let's just adjust that baseline a little bit more. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to make this group fixed resolution. And we also want to make our displace source group fixed resolution. But I'm not going to do that because I just want to show you the difference that it makes. So to this new group, I'm going to add filters, distortion, bump map. And then I'm going to use our displace source as the source. I'm going to set the direction to 90, and I'm going to set that amount to 4. Now, it's not looking good at all, and that's because the displace source is being scaled to fit the size of that text layer. The text layer is its own dimensions, not the dimensions of the project. So if we now make the displace source fixed resolution, it's looking good. So we're getting that effect. So we're well on our way. So what I'm then going to do is I'm going to duplicate that bump map, right-click, duplicate, and let's adjust some of these amounts. Let's set the first one to 3, I think, the next one to 6, and then let's duplicate it one more time, and let's set this one to 8. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set one of these directions to the opposite direction. So this middle one, I'm going to set the direction to 270. That's kind of a lot more interesting. You see that's 90. It's all just coming in from the left. But with 270, that's also coming in from the right a little bit. And I quite like that. Maybe let's reduce that amount down to 5. So I think we've got a fairly good result at this point, and we can move on. So the other thing I want to do is I want to add an image mask to this text layer. So right-click, add image mask, and I'm going to use the displace source, and we want to set the source channel to luminance, and then we want to invert it. And so what this is going to do, if I turn off those bump maps, is it's going to fade on this text layer. And that's going to allow us to create our transition from our other piece of text. So let's make a new group, object new group, and I'm just going to copy that glitch text into it. So Alt, drag it into that group there. And let's give this a different word. Let's call it fancy. And what we're going to do here is we're going to uninvert the image mask. So now our text is changing like so. Now you'll notice that it's not quite right because we're getting a little bit of transparency before we want our glitch effect to happen. And we can sort that out. If you remember, we added a white solid. We just need to extend that white solid to this point. So I'm going to hit O on the keyboard so that it stays solid. It only fades once the glitching happens. So let's do a bit of tidy up here. This group here I'm going to call text B because it's going to be the second one we see. The top one is going to be text A because it's going to be the first one we see. And close those two groups up. Let's make another new group and let's put those two into it. Now I want to do something fancy with a colored glow for this. So what I'm going to do is take that group and I'm going to make a clone of it. So with the clone selected, I'm going to come to Filters, Blur, and I'm going to use a fancy blur called Channel Blur. And what I'm going to do is, let's set this amount initially to 64. I want to turn off red, green, and just be left with blue. And I think you can see now we've got this really nice effect. And we can make it even more intense by just duplicating that a couple of times. Right-click, duplicate. And just increasing this amount progressively. So 128 for the next one, and 256 for the last one. And then just adjust these mix values, so 30% for the top one, and 60% for the middle one. So now I think that's looking really rather nice. So let's close this group and call it glows, which is what it is. Let's call this group master text. Let's make yet another new group and let's add those two groups to it. And then what we can do is make this group 3D. Now I want to add a background in order to be able to do our reflection and all the rest of it. So let's make yet another new group. And into that group, I'm going to import the element called floor slab. Bring that in. I'm going to rotate this group through 90 degrees on X. And I'm going to bring it down, let's say -200. So inside this 3D group with the floor in it, I want to make another group. And this one I want to be 2D. And I'm going to put the floor slab into it. And I'm going to select the group. And I'm going to make a fixed resolution. And let's go for a width of 6,000 and a height of 8,000. And then to this group, I'm going to add filters, tiling, collider tile. And I'm just going to increase that width till we start to see the edges of this tile. So around about 1620 seems to be doing it. And the same thing with the height. Increase that till we just see the gap round about there. So that's 1070. Now we can add a light, I think, just to make this look a bit more interesting. Already more dramatic, but the problem with the light is that it's affected our text, which we want to be very, very bright. So I'm going to select this group here, which is the sort of master everything group for the text. And I'm going to come to lighting and I'm going to turn the lighting off. And what I need to do is I need to put this floor group behind the rest of it. So I'm going to move it right to the back. So I'm going to call this group floor. Let's just sort out this light here. I'm going to set its color to be a little bit cooler, I think, just to match the light from the text. Let's set its intensity, let's first of all set its fall off to 20. Let's set its intensity up to 1,000. And perhaps just move it up a little bit on Y. Let's go for 200. Oh, 200, not 2,000. So now it looks like it's casting the light onto the floor from the text. Okay, so let's have a look at doing this reflection, which is the fun part. First of all, I'm going to come into this group here that's got the collider tile with our floor slab. And I want to actually make use of these nice divisions in the floor. So I think I'm going to set that scale to about 60, and then we'll be able to see these divisions, and I think they're going to look really rather nice. So let's call this group here main. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a clone of it. And let's call this one reflection. And then we're just going to come over here and turn on the layer order button. So now what we're going to do is we're going to rotate it through 180 degrees on X and then just bring it down on Y to around there. So the cunning trick to making this look like a reflection is to select this clone layer and add an image mask. And we're going to come in and select this group here that is in that floor group and it's got a collider tile on it. So we're going to add that. We're going to switch the source channel to luminance and we need to turn that group back on again. Now what we need to do is we need to select that image mask and add a levels to it. And we're going to take that black value and we're going to crunch it like this. So we've got lots of detail in there. And then what we're going to do is just take that clone and add a Gaussian blur to it. And let's set that value to around 128. And now if I add a camera and we add a sweep, and let's just set that value to about 15, you'll see that we've got a reflection on our floor here. Now, I don't much like what's happening with our floor, so I just want to fix that. I'm going to come to that floor slab and adjust its scale to 20%. And then I'm just going to adjust that collider tile. And let's go for 735 by 475. And it's giving us a lot more tiles. And I think that's a lot more interesting now. And you can see that effect I was talking about. It's really nice to be able to see the reflection being broken up by those tiled elements. Now, you'll probably notice, you won't notice, but there is some speckling going on here. And what you'll need to do is to make sure that when you render this, you select best quality. Otherwise, you'll get some really nasty results on the floor. Now, I want to give more of a sense that this is lighting up the floor. And I'm going to do that with an extra element in this reflection group. So I'm just going to turn off the camera for the time being, just while I set this up. And I'm going to select the Bezier tool. And I'm going to come from around here, down there. Doesn't have to be too accurate, but just something roughly like this. So what I'm going to do is set its color to be something like that. This should do, and I'm going to feather it in, so -100. I'm going to set its blend mode to add, and then I'm going to copy the image mask from this reflection layer. So Alt drag that onto the Bezier like that. And I think you can see that that's given us a nice sort of, turn the camera back on again, this sort of blue wash. And we can play with exactly how that works, maybe bring these out just a little bit, just to give us the feel that we want. So we can play with that light path as much as we like. So that's going to help with the overall effect. So I think my camera's a bit boring. So what I'm going to do is increase its angle of view to 75. And then let's come and adjust its position. Let's pull out to 600. And I think that's looking a lot more dramatic, I think. So let's also build a little bit more of the rest of the scene. So let's make a new group. I'll make it at the top. And I'm going to call this wall, because we need a back wall. And I'm going to import this wall JPEG. I'm going to set its scale to 500% and its Z position to -3000. -3000, not 300. There we go. And I need to put this right at the back of the scene. So now, although we're not really seeing it, it's filling up that back. And once we add the rest of our lights, it's going to work. I'm going to make another new group, and I'm going to call this girders. And I'm going to import the element called shelving. Let's come to properties. Let's rotate it through 90 degrees on Z. And then let's come to object replicate. So first of all, I want to switch to 3D. And then I want to select box. I want to open up the size. Let's have a width of 1415 and a height of 360 and a depth of 1500. So let's sort these rows and ranks out. So 3 columns, 3 rows, and 3 ranks. And then let's adjust its position. I'm going to go for 500 on Y and 500 on Z. And we need to put this almost at the back of the scene. So I'm going to come to Object, Send to Back. And actually, it can stay there. That's actually working. It doesn't have to be in front of the wall. But so now we've got this really nice parallax. And we've got that nice glitch happening. And obviously the glitch is being reflected in the floor, which is a really cool thing. Just going to push in a bit on that camera because I think we're a little bit too far out. Let's go for 400 or maybe even 300. And there's a few more things I want to do, one of which is to desaturate this blue glow a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that glows group and add a color hue saturation. I'm going to set the hue angle to be 300. And then I'm going to increase the saturation to around 0.3 and the value up to 2. And I think that's a much nicer result. You also see it's giving us a much hotter reflection on the floor, and I think that's going to be good too. And let's just make a little bit of an adjustment to our floor. I think I like it more when I can see one of these cracks in the light. So I'm going to set the Y value to -200. And I really like it when we see that light just hitting that gap there. I think it looks really nice. Okay, just a few more things before we finish. I'm just going to turn off this reflection group because it's slowing us down a bit just for the time being. And I want to just briefly turn off the camera. And then I want to come to my displace source group. I'm going to move that right to the top so we can easily find it. So inside this displace group, I'm going to import this thing that I've made for you called glitcher texture. And immediately you'll see we've got this additional layer of continuous glitching, or rather intermittent glitching, and we can dial that in whenever we feel like we want some extra interesting little glitches. So it's timed to happen more or less with the main animation. So what we can do is just literally just affect its opacity whenever we want to see it, and when we want a bit to disappear. So I quite like that to that point there. Hit an opacity keyframe, step forward 1 frame, set it down to 0. Let's come forward a bit. Let's set an opacity keyframe, step forward 1 frame, set it up to 100, step forward a few frames, another keyframe, step forward another, down to 100 again. Few frames forward, another keyframe, step forward up to 100, few frames more forward, another keyframe, 1 frame forward, down to 100. And so altogether, that's going to look like that with that nice glitch there, little one there, another one there. You can have as many of those as you want. So with our camera back on again, that sweep is much too much. Let's adjust that camera sweep. Let's go for about -4 to 5 or something. And I think those are really nice, those little extra intermittent glitches. So just one final detail. Let me just turn off the camera while we do it. I want to add some texture to the text. So inside this master text group, I'm going to make a new group, object new group, and I'm going to put those 2 text groups inside it. So with the master text group selected, I'm going to import the text texture. I'm going to right-click, add image mask, and I'm going to use this group that I've made with the text groups in it as the source. Then let's add a levels, color levels, and let's just bring the black in quite a bit because we want to start seeing that texture like that. And then let's just adjust the texture scale. So I'm going to go for about 100% on X and leave it as it was. So I think that's improved things a bit. And there's just one final thing I'm sure you're going to want to know about, and that's how to make the text disappear at the end, so glitching off at the end. So I'm coming into my displace group here. I've got my 3 clouds elements there. Just above them, I'm going to make a new group and put the 3 of them inside it. And then I'm going to make a clone of that group. Right-click, make clone layer. I'm going to move that up to the top. And then I want to move that to 7 seconds on the timeline. So I've come to 7 seconds on the timeline. And then what I can do is, with that clone selected, I can come to mark, move, selected to endpoint. And what we need to do with this clone is to add a color negative. So we're swapping it around, and now you'll see that that's glitching off, but we're seeing the old text underneath. So we just need to make sure that we come into our master text layer, and right inside here, we need to make sure that text A is finished well before 7 seconds, or even at 7 seconds if we want to be precise. I'm going to hit O on the keyboard, and that won't be apparent once we've glitched off. So there you go, it's glitching off like that. As it's glitching off, we should really think about animating the light. So let's do that. Let's come to the inspector. Let's set an intensity keyframe at that point. And then once it's completely disappeared there, 9:15, let's set that intensity down to 0. And now we get... What I did was I added a few more lights just so that there would be something left at the end. So they're very, very low intensity. Let's make them a little bit blue, just so there's something left to the scene after we've faded. And the final thing that I did, which is pretty cool, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this, so I'll leave you to animate it, is that I animated the position of the girders. So right at the first frame, I set a position for those girders of -310 on Y. And then we can move forward to, I don't know, about a second and a half or something, and keyframe that. Sorry, I should have keyframed that. Set that to 0, come back to the start, -310. And so then the girders will lift up like that. But what I actually did, I did it with an overshoot behavior, so it had a little bounce at the end, which is a nicer way of doing it. And then I also just animated them down at the end, so around about there, and then I set that again back to -310. And with a nice sound effect, that's going to be pretty cool. Okay, so I hope that's been interesting. Thanks very much indeed for watching. See you again soon.